What if I told you that I, as a graphic designer, have more power than the Prime Minister? No, I don't really. I just wanted to have a shocking opening line. My introduction was somehow similar to the clickbait phenomena. So look at me, I've got something sensational for you to see. But I actually don't. What I'm about to tell you is in fact so well known, it's actually a cliché. Now this is the point about clichés, they're obvious by definition, and that's why we don't reflect on them. So the concept behind this phrase is that the outcomes of an intelligent or creative mind can be more powerful, more effective than mere physical strength. It summarizes a peculiar feature of the humankind, as in, we seem to have the same basic instincts as any other animal species. But we need something more. We need to communicate at another level. We need to understand each other and prove our strength in another context. And this is when the basic instincts such as nourishment, reproducing, protecting the nest become the armament industry, love poems, advertising. Now, as a graphic designer, the way people connect and interact with each other is mostly fascinating for me, and I love seeing how the humans transform these interactions and these connections into art, regardless of the purpose. But why should this be important for you as an audience? Now, some designers agree in saying that good design has to be subconscious, and that's why it's unnoticed, just like an obvious cliché. But this is why it's easy to dismiss graphic design as unimportant. However, graphic design is in our maps. It's in the street signs that you looked at while getting here, hopefully. It's in these lights. It's in our flags, in our product labels. So if it guides us through the streets and in the choice of our products, services, information, culture, how about our values and ideas? I'm not here to give you an answer or my personal opinion. I'm just questioning the limits of human communication and the awareness of these limits. So the concept of cliché is fundamental in communication and therefore in graphic communication. It seems quite simple, but there are so many things that could go wrong here, and that is due to the many, many factors that are involved in this process. Let's start from the individuals, the sender and the recipient in this case. Tomlinson's quote here summarizes very effectively a specific kind of miscommunication that is the one that is based on people's identities. Identity is a nebulous mix of values, citizenship, language, ideas. It's not really clear. And I can give you actually an example of when identity can be even more hard to define, where clichés don't really correspond to reality. That is myself. So the visual part of my identity says that my genes are Asian. And in fact, I am a mixture of Japanese, former Soviet republics, Crimean indigenous people, but my cultural background is mainly European. So let's say that the cultural background of the people, of the citizens of the small city in Italy, where I spent 90% of my life, caused quite a few episodes of xenophobia that I've had to face as an Asian-looking person, despite the fact that I am Italian. On the other hand, showing my Russian passport at the border with Ukraine at the moment means that I'm not allowed to enter. I'm not allowed to enter Ukraine. But there's nothing else but my passport to prove that I'm Russian visually. So why is it that I feel like I'm at home in Scotland? Because here is where my identity is not defined by my language or physical appearance. My identity here is based on my personality, my ideas, my actions. So I was talking about cliches earlier, and if you think of that, this cultural background that I keep talking about can be visualized as a set of cliches, as a number of stereotyped ideas that we base our identity on. And these stereotyped ideas are really important in mass communication because information has to be made as simple as possible, and that's why we need to base the graphics on the very simple elements. Now, this simplistic way of conveying a message is not an issue in itself. What worries me is, are we able to manage this simplicity? Are we aware of it? I'll give you a few practical examples. Now, Shepard Fairey produced this artwork in response to a growing anti-Muslim sentiment in the United States. So he used the exact same color scheme of the 2008 already iconic Hope posters featuring Barack Obama. So in this way, he was stating a continuity. The smart use of simple symbols such as the US flag combined with the hijab sends a very simple message. Being Muslim does not exclude being American, or even more, if you want to look at it in a different way, this is the new face of America. It's very simple, and that's why it is effective. The same method was used in 2014 by the Russian Information Department. Again, very simple symbols that everyone can access. I'll give you some background. The small geographic area that you see here is Crimea, which is where part of my family is from. And in 2014, the people of Crimea were called at a referendum. They needed to choose if they wanted to stay with Ukraine, remain part of Ukraine, or be annexed to the Russian Federation. So this billboard was created by the Russians, the Russian Information Department. And despite the fact that in 2014, in that moment, Crimea was still part of Ukraine, this is in Russian. You don't need to read Russian, however, to understand what this billboard says. Because it puts the choice between a Crimea under the Russian flag, on the one hand, and its opponent that is here not represented by the colors and symbols of Ukraine, but by the colors and symbols that are sadly well known to belong to a completely different graphics, which is the one that belongs to the Nazi regime. So what the message is that the choice is between good and evil itself. When I first saw this, my European background made me think, this is so reductive. How could such a cartoonishly simplistic, polarizing approach work in any other context? Could it ever work in any other background? I'll give you one last practical example. So I was reading through the news on a Russian news website about a year ago when I saw the picture of a young girl wearing a veil next to the big headline, Crimean Tatar joins ISIS. So I had the image, I had the type, had all the graphics, no space for doubt, what would you have thought? Now, I admit it, I would have believed it, if only briefly. I would have been as guilty as everyone else. If I didn't know that young girl, actually, if that young girl wasn't my cousin. Yes, that veil did correspond to her Muslim faith. And her appearance did correspond to her origins, to her Crimean origins. That was true. But what else did these visual elements say about her? How did they connect to ISIS? Well, I asked myself this question, but no one else in the audience did. They saw ISIS. They saw the veil. There was nothing else they wanted to know. So, what were the intentions? What were the aims of the diffusion of such information? Sometimes the aims of misleading graphics is all about the clickbait. And sometimes it is genuine misinformation. It does happen. In any case, it is the audience. It is the audience who reacts or responds. And this is what I was talking about in the beginning. That no, I don't have more power than the Prime Minister, but the audience does. So you do, we do. Because we have the chance to either react or respond. So think of how you assimilate the information that gets to you in graphic form. Do you know the cliches that rule your visual language? It's easy to identify those cliches that we think to be wrong, that we disagree with. But we need to admit that even the cliches that we think to be truthful have exceptions, flaws, and complications, and backgrounds. So have your reactions, be supportive, be disappointed, be angry, be indifferent. It doesn't matter. The real difference is in how you show your support, your disappointment, your anger, or your indifference. Thanks.